Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. In Star Wars, being in the bounty hunting industry is like working in real estate. It's everyone's fallback job after their career stagnates or their homeworld is destroyed by a pack of space whales. People are drawn to this profession because they think quick money can be made. But is this industry as lucrative as people make it out as? Or are we just falling for the romantic representation of a job that is both brutal and unrewarding when you consider the risks involved? After all, not everyone has a suit of Beskar lying around in their house. In today's video, we're going to be taking a deep look at the bounty hunting industry. We're going to examine why there are so many bounty hunters in Star Wars, and we're going to talk about the organizations and structures that tried to stabilize and control this very chaotic industry. Do you guys remember like a few months back when there was that incident concerning those van life YouTubers and like a murder? Well, my first reaction was the van life is not that good and it should not be glamorized. I mean, it's ridiculous. Just ask people who actually live in vans.
I am 35 years old, I am divorced, and I live in a van down by the river.
I mean, just go tent camping, guys. Even in winter with the right gear, you can have a blast and not be sketchy. Anyway, while everyone was looking for the suspect of that murder, suddenly Dog the Bounty Hunter reappeared in our collective consciousness. You guys remember that guy, right? He has a face that's basically a rare steak topped off with the body hair of a golden retriever. He used to entertain us with his reality TV shows in the early 2000s. And so basically, Dog the Bounty Hunter reappeared on cable news giving advice and suggestions about how to find the missing suspect. Apparently, he even joined the hunt himself. Here is the mind-blowing thing about Dog the Bounty Hunter. He is the closest thing we have to Boba Fett in our universe. And if you watch his TV shows, despite his very tough and mean presence, he actually uses all non-lethal weapons. He doesn't run around, shooting flamethrowers out of his wrists and shooting people with blasters. And that's because bounty hunters in most modern countries here on Earth with functioning law enforcement at the local and federal level will be severely limited in the amount of force they can use to apprehend a suspect. Because ultimately, Dog the Bounty Hunter, despite how much he's given to society as Trailer Park Batman, is just a civilian. And while laws will vary on what kind of force a bounty hunter can use from state to state, Dog the Bounty Hunter won't be disintegrating anyone with a disruptor anytime soon. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure he can't even use a firearm because he's a convicted felon. That's because bounty hunters, like the rest of us, are only allowed to kill in specific circumstances that can be classified as self-defense, which also varies state to state. And so to begin to understand the bounty hunting industry in Star Wars, we just have to compare individuals like Fennec Shand, Boba Fett, to individuals like Dog the Bounty Hunter and see the differences. The dog is restrained by rules and regulation. He carries an assortment of non-lethal weapons to help him capture people. The bounty hunters of Star Wars, on the other hand, are more heavily equipped than your standard infantry guns. They usually wear heavy armor, have redundant weapon systems, and use a healthy amount of explosives. Even in America, where you have the highest amount of gun ownership per capita outside of Mandalore, the sight of an individual walking down the street strapped with multiple weapons and explosives could be alarming, unless it's like Comic-Con in New York or something. In Star Wars, people aren't fazed by heavily armored and armed Mandalorians because people respect their religion, maybe? Or more importantly, the central government's reach is just very minuscule, especially during the Galactic Republic period. I mean, sure, the ramifications of economic and trade policies dictated by the Republic were felt wide and far throughout the entire galaxy, but the Galactic Republic hardly had the surface of Coruscant under control, let alone the entire galaxy. And in the last 1,000 years of its existence, the Republic basically had no standing military. Or lying down military. This was thanks to the Ruusan Reformation, which disbanded the Jedi-led Republic military and redirected those funds towards subsidizing local militias and planetary defense forces of member states. But unfortunately, due to the size and structure and incompetence of the Republic government, the entire government tax system and the services it gave out were essentially one giant Ponzi scheme. Before we continue though, a word from our sponsor for today's video, Ownersaber.com. Once again, we have the Cypher Blade. This is one of the lighter and more simple blades offered by Ownersaber.com. As you can see, it looks amazing, the light quality is beautiful, and it's actually very functional. The blade's hilt gives off a Sith vibe with its sleek black handle and claw-like guard which surrounds the emitter assembly. Despite that elegance, this is still a pretty durable thing. I mean, it's designed to be whacked around, parried, and sparred with. The Cypher has also many of the same features that their premium Xenopixel line has, like customized color, sound effects, and different types of blade modes. From now until February 28th, the Cypher Blade will be available for purchase for 30% off, and with our discount code MEOW, that's all caps, you'll get an additional 10% off. For more information, check out the link down below in the description. You see, entrance in the Republic was very difficult. Getting a seat in the Senate was nearly impossible and could take thousands of years of waiting. Most worlds didn't even have direct representation and instead had to share a representative with an entire sector or region, which of course caused problems, like in the Kashyyyk sector, where the Wookiee senator from Kashyyyk also represented the Trandoshans, who liked to hunt Wookiees for sport. To make matters worse, the earlier members of the Republic had far more power than the newly arrived members, and so most of the funding and aid that the federal government gave out was directed towards these worlds that all sat in the core region. And therefore, they had more stable and functioning governments, which usually meant some kind of law enforcement and rule of law was also present. In worlds like Alderaan, the upper levels of Coruscant, Kuat, bounty hunters had to operate carefully and not upset local private security or law enforcement rules. But venture a few levels down from the surface of Coruscant to enter the industrial wasteland outside of Coronet City on Corellia, and law enforcement more or less disappeared. Here's where the Ponzi scheme really starts to be noticeable. The worlds that joined the Republic the latest, and in the largest numbers, are the Outer Rim colonies. These worlds still pay taxes and have to abide by Republic-enforced tariffs and trade regulations, which oftentimes favored the core worlds. But the reality is, this tax money is being pumped into a completely corrupt and inefficient government system. The Republic can't even provide security or basic services for its Outer Rim members. And so these individuals get very little for their taxation. This is taxation without representation or any services. This is essentially why the Clone Wars started. I mean, just look at Naboo, which wasn't even in the Outer Rim. It was actually a Mid-Rim world. They were illegally blockaded by the Trade Federation, and the Republic just stood by watching because there wasn't enough political or economic pressure to force them into action. And so it's not surprising on worlds like Tatooine or in the Hutt space where people have to fend for themselves, when someone wrongs you or poses a threat, you have to go looking for armed gunmen for hire if you're not willing to get your hands dirty yourself. Now, in some worlds, things happen just like how they did in the Old West. An old soldier or a ruffian decides to go semi-legit and fills a need in a town or a city when it comes to law enforcement. Or perhaps these bounty hunters will just take bounties from the local crime lords who actually rule these planets. It wasn't uncommon for individuals like Jabba the Hutt or the Pike Syndicate to have their own dossier of bounty hunters. These individuals worked as contractors, but generally preferred having one employer over a period of time for stability reasons. Also, in Star Wars, bounty hunters didn't just collect bounties. As a matter of fact, bounty hunter was just a term that was loosely associated with an armed gunman for hire. While some bounty hunters only focused on legit bounties, most bounty hunters also did a wide assortment of jobs, ranging from kidnapping, extortion, assassination, to protection and transporting goods. Here in the States, bounty hunters can basically only go after bounties. Specifically, individuals who have made agreements with bailsmen that if they skip on their payments, then bondsmen legally can send the dog after them. In Star Wars, naturally, some bounty hunters would band together and try to create some stability and protection for this very dangerous profession. The Bounty Hunters Guild, or the Bondsman Guild, was one of these organizations. Its roots stem from the Republic era and set up some ground rules for its members. For instance, the Bounty Hunting Code prohibited its members from slaying other guild members. It was also forbidden for hunters to ask about their targets once the bounty was delivered. The guild also had their own bail bondsmen who would collect bounties from various sources and give them out to individual hunters. There was also a hierarchy amongst the hunters, and bail bondsmen generally would try to allocate the right jobs for the right individuals. If a bounty hunter from the guild is assigned a job by the bail bondsman, usually other members are not allowed to compete against them, although deals could be arranged between two bounty hunters who shared the same target.
I have a suggestion.
Proceed.
We split the reward.
This is acceptable.
These organizations, in theory, made bounty hunting as a profession a lot more stable and predictable. But the reality was, this was a profession that attracted some of the most dangerous and unhinged people in the galaxy. And the Bounty Hunting Guild lacked any real power from controlling these types of loose cannons, like Relard Valance or even Din Djarin. Both individuals broke several bounty hunting guild codes and basically got away with it. Bounty Hunting Guild did represent a very serious attempt to standardize this dangerous profession. It was the Bounty Hunting Guild that would standardize the use of holopucks for identifying targets, and they would also begin handing out tracking fobs, which made finding quarries much easier. In some ways, the Bounty Hunting Guild's mentality and purpose mirrored the true Mandalorians, a group of Mandalorian mercenaries who were off-put by the behavior of some of the more degenerate members of their people, the Death Watch. The leader of the true Mandalorians, Jason Muriel, would start the Super Commando Codex, which set some ground rules on how Mandalorians took contracts and what their conduct on the battlefield would be like. The last few hundred years of the Galactic Republic were chaotic, and so the Bounty Hunting Guild would grow naturally in this free market wherever it was needed. But the rise of the Empire gave way to a new type of governance, a dictatorship based on rigid control of society at almost every level. And while the Empire appeared very anti-crime and against chaos, that was only propaganda at the federal level. At the local level, the Empire did very little to get rid of crime. And that's because many local governors and mobs had no checks and balances and were essentially political appointees placed there indefinitely by Palpatine. And so we actually see increased cooperation between the Empire and criminal organization, leading to Imperial officers profiting from black market trade, drugs, and slaves. It also became very apparent that the Imperial military and Stormtrooper Corps was not very good at chasing down dangerous individuals. It was sort of the wrong tool for the job. It was like a sledgehammer where a scalpel was needed. And so bounty hunters quickly became one of the favorite tools of Imperial leaders. For one, bounties could be placed on high-level dissidents fighting against the Empire, and all you needed was some Imperial judge to write up some phony charges and a good reward, and that individual won't be able to show their face in public for some time. It worked so well that eventually the Empire would try to standardize the bounty hunting profession themselves. They would, of course, work with the Bounty Hunting Guild as well. One move they made was the Imperial Office of Criminal Investigations would start handing out licenses, otherwise known as Imperial Peacekeeping Certificates, which would certify individuals to hunt for all official Imperial and Bounty Hunting Guild targets. This also gave bounty hunters access to the Imperial Enforcement Data Corps. The Empire would also set up posting agencies and offices where bounties could be collected by guild members, and also that's where the data core was usually accessed from. The Empire would even attempt to standardize the prices for a certain type of bounties. This was usually based on what type of crime they committed and whether they were wanted at the local, regional, or federal level. But even then, the standards weren't always followed. Jabba the Hutt, for instance, placed a bounty of around 224,000 credits for Han Solo after he lost that shipment of spice. But Luke only got a bounty of 60,000 credits after he destroyed the Death Star, killing millions of innocent Imperials. Then there's Leia Organa, who many saw as the figurehead of the earlier rebellion. She had a bounty of almost 10 million credits on her head. So as you can see, the presence of a robust and strong bounty hunting industry in your local area probably means that the government has neglected its security responsibilities. So that's why in Star Wars, basically everyone is a bounty hunter. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.